Birthdays used to mean balloons, cake, and mom humming in the kitchen. This year, it meant eviction. And my father delivered it with the same face he wore at board meetings. I had decorated anyway. Blue streamers. A homemade cake. 1 candle. Liam, the kid next door, helped me hang them. He said I deserved something special. I smiled and lied. Said I was fine. But you never really get used to being forgotten by your own family. I sat on the edge of the couch in the same apartment I'd kept spotless for 3 years. The lease was under my name. The bills paid from 2 jobs. But the building, owned by my father. He said it gave him peace of mind. The knock came at 4:16 p.m. like clockwork. He never called first. He didn't have to. I opened the door, and there he was. Pressed suit. Polished shoes. Eyes that skimmed the room like everything was a negotiation. "Happy birthday," he said. No hug. Just a white envelope in his hand. "What's this?" I already knew. But I asked anyway. "Just paperwork," he replied. "You've been doing well. I think it's time you transitioned out of this place. We're selling it." The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. He walked past the balloon string dangling from the ceiling. Stepped around the cake on the table. He didn't ask about the candle. Didn't ask if I was okay. He just sat down and adjusted his cufflinks. "It's a good opportunity," he said. "You can find something else. Maybe split rent with friends." Like I was 22 again. Like I hadn't spent the last 5 years holding this family together after Mom died. I sat across from him. Legs folded. Hands shaking under the table. But my voice. Steady. "You're evicting me on my birthday." He blinked. Tilted his head like he didn't get it. "It's business, Sarah. Don't take it personally." That phrase, "don't take it personally," is what people say when they're doing something deeply personal and trying to wash their hands of it. He stood up, buttoned his coat. "I'll give you 60 days. That's more than generous." I didn't move. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. Because that version of me? She died a long time ago. After he left, I sat alone in the quiet. The candle still flickering on top of the cake. So I lit it. Sang to myself. And blew it out with no wish. Because wishes are for people who believe someone's listening. Instead, I got up, walked to the drawer under the sink, and pulled out a folder. Black leather. Marked. Mitchell Strategy. Inside was a deed. Signed. Sealed. And mine. 6 months ago, when Dad told me the family house was in danger, I sold my car, emptied my savings, and bought it from the bank. He never knew. He thought a third-party investor saved him. He never looked past the LLC name. But that house, the one he was about to sell, it's mine. And the apartment complex he just threatened me with? Tied to the same trust. A trust I now control. You see, he always saw me as the daughter who stayed quiet. Who cleaned up after everyone. Who let things slide. But while he played business, I became business. And now, he thinks he owns everything. But soon he'll learn, the contract is mine. I stared at the envelope again. Then tucked it under the cake. Because that's what it was. A gift. He just didn't know I'd already unwrapped the real one months ago. That night, I sat with my tea, a candle burning low, and the folder in my lap. And I said it out loud. Not to the room. To myself. If it's business, then let's do business. He gave me an eviction notice on my birthday. But what he didn't know was that the papers he feared most were already in my drawer, and had my name on the deed. They say daughters are supposed to be protected. Cherished. Sheltered. But I learned early that some daughters are born to hold the roof up even as it caves in on them. 6 months before he evicted me, my father called in a rare panic. It was about the house. The house. The one Mom built with her hands. Painted every shutter herself. Where she planted tulips and believed in things like family dinners and forgiveness. "The mortgage is under review," he said, as if those words weren't bombs. He didn't ask me for help. He never does. But he dropped enough hints to make it clear that if someone didn't step in, we'd lose it. What he didn't know was that I had already seen the foreclosure notice on the kitchen table months ago. I had photographed it. Not to use as leverage. To protect what she built. I sat with the numbers for 3 nights. Crunched every cent between grocery receipts and late-night coffee shifts. I couldn't afford it. But I couldn't afford not to. So I made calls. Asked questions. Set up a shell LLC called Bloomridge Properties, named after the street where Mom planted her first tulips. And I did something he never expected. I bought the house. He never questioned it. Just signed where the notary pointed. Too proud to admit he didn't understand half the terms. He thought some angel investor had come to save his legacy. He didn't know it was the daughter he'd always looked through. I didn't do it for revenge. Not then. I did it because I couldn't stand the thought of strangers walking through her bedroom like it was an open house. The day the sale finalized, I walked through every room alone. Barefoot. Quiet. The walls still held her. The fireplace still smelled like Thanksgiving. Her garden was overgrown, but the tulips were trying. I promised myself I'd restore it piece by piece. And I did. On weekends. With scraped knees and borrowed tools. And now. He wants to sell it. Like it's his. Like he's doing the family a favor. He doesn't know his name is no longer on the title. He doesn't know the man he thinks is handling the trust is just my lawyer in another suit. He calls me dramatic. Says I'm emotional. But you tell me, what's more emotional than burying your mother and then watching her home be signed away like a business transaction? So yes, I got emotional. Emotional enough to educate myself on property law. On trusts. On quiet power. The night after my birthday, I pulled out the original deed. Ran my fingers over my name. Sarah E. Mitchell written in real ink. No junior partner. No caretaker. No allowed to stay until it's convenient. Just owner. I smiled. Because he didn't know that when he evicted me, he was handing me the match I'd light at my own bonfire. This wasn't about stealing the house. It was about saving it from being erased. And now, the clock was ticking. Because in 3 days, they were throwing a dinner. Family only, as Vanessa called it. I was invited. Not warmly. Not lovingly. Just politely. Because they still thought I was on the outside. But I wouldn't be coming as the forgotten daughter. I'd be coming as the owner of the thing they were trying to sell. I picked out a blazer. Not expensive. Not flashy. Just sharp enough to cut through every lie they tried to dress in polite conversation. And I printed out every page of the sale. Every email. Every clause. Every signature they didn't read closely enough. I clipped it all into one folder. The same one he handed me on my birthday. Except this one was mine. And it had teeth. He thought I saved the house for him. But I saved it for the version of me he never bothered to know. The one who stopped waiting to be rescued and started signing contracts. They invited me to dinner to push me out. But I didn't come hungry. I came holding the receipts to everything they thought I couldn't touch. The house looked polished. Like it was already prepped for listing photos. Candles lit. Wine decanted. Napkins folded the way Mom used to fold them except, colder now. Everything here had become a performance after she left. Vanessa greeted me at the door. Smiling too wide. A glass of white wine in her hand and poison tucked behind her tongue. You made it, Sarah. We were just saying how strong you've been lately. Translation, we've decided you're in the way again. I nodded. Handed her a bottle of the cheap stuff. Let her feel superior for 5 more minutes. She ushered me into the dining room where my father sat at the head of the table like a king holding court in a house he no longer owned. Amy and Mark were there too. Smiling like sheep. Chiming in just enough to avoid direct guilt. They were never cruel. Just complicit. And sometimes, that hurts more. I sat down at the end. Near the window. The same seat I always took growing up. The one closest to the kitchen where I could sneak off to do the dishes while everyone else laughed. Vanessa cleared her throat. We wanted to talk to you about next steps. She unfolded a piece of paper. Real estate listings. Studio apartments. Townhouses far away. This could be a good reset for you. My father sipped his wine. You've had a good run here, Sarah. But we've decided it's time to let the house go. They said it like a kindness. Like a gift wrapped in displacement. They didn't ask. They told. I let them finish. Let the awkward silence sit. And then, slowly, I reached into my purse. And pulled out the folder. Black. Clean. Marked only with one thing. Deed. I laid it on the table. Slid it forward like a chess move. Before you go any further, I said, you should probably read this. Vanessa blinked. Confused. Already annoyed. What's this? I didn't answer. My father opened it. Page 1. The deed. With my name clearly printed. He flipped to the second page. The payment summary. The bank transfer. The recorded ownership. His hand trembled. But his face. Stone. This is a joke, he said. I tilted my head. Is it? The silence cracked. Mark leaned forward. Amy covered her mouth. Vanessa's face drained of color. I bought the house 6 months ago, I said softly. Through Bloomridge Properties. The trust is under my name. Your name was removed after the finalization. My father stared at me. But not like a daughter. Like a mirror he didn't want to look into. You went behind my back. I nodded. You tried to sell the home my mother built. You think I went behind your back? You were always facing the wrong direction. The room held its breath. I stood up. Walked toward the window. The garden below still blooming. The tulips. Mom's tulips. You told me not to take it personally, I said. But everything you've ever done to this house, to this family, to me was personal. I turned. You don't have the authority to sell it. You don't own it. I do. Vanessa tried to speak. Sarah, honey, this is all very complicated. I cut her off. No, Vanessa. It's actually quite simple. You tried to erase me. But I wrote my name on every page you didn't read. My father stood. For the first time, he looked small. Not angry. Not powerful. Just small. You think this makes you better than us? I shook my head. No. It just means I finally stopped letting you make me feel worse. I gathered the folder. Tucked it back into my purse. The room was still silent as I walked toward the door. But just before I left, I turned. The house doesn't sell unless I say so. And I'm not saying anything. I stepped into the night. Cool air. Quiet street. One breath deeper than the last. In my purse was power. But in my chest was something even better. Peace. They set the table to push me out. But I came carrying every document that proved I belonged. Because when they try to erase you, sign your name where they thought you'd never dare. They tried to erase me with whispers and signatures. So I responded with ink and truth. The kind that doesn't fade. After the dinner, they went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that says, we're processing this. The kind that says, how do we take it back? 2 days later, I got a call from Amanda, my lawyer. You might want to see this, she said, sending me a listing. My mother's house. My house. Suddenly on the market. I stared at the photos. My childhood bedroom. The kitchen with her handwritten recipe cards still pinned to the fridge. The garden with her tulips. Listed. Staged. Priced. They hadn't even asked. They didn't have to. Because they didn't believe I'd fight. Not really. I drove straight to the brokerage office and sat across from the stunned realtor. This listing is fraudulent, I said. I'm the owner. I showed her the documents. The LLC. The deed. The trust transfer. She blinked. Apologized. Removed the listing before I even left the building. That night, my father showed up at my door. No warning. Just a knock. The kind of knock you hear in your bones. I opened it. He looked tired. Not defeated. Just old. You didn't need to do this, Sarah. I held the doorframe. Let him speak. This house was meant to be a legacy. For the family. For all of us. I almost laughed. You mean for you. To sell. To divide. To rewrite history. He stepped closer. But not inside. He never crossed thresholds he didn't own. You could have talked to me. I raised an eyebrow. Like how you talked to me on my birthday. With a notice instead of a gift. He looked away. Finally. It was just business, he muttered. There it was again. That word. Business. As if blood was a brand. I took a deep breath. This isn't about a house anymore, Dad. This is about how you erased me because I didn't fit into your structure. His silence spoke more than his defense ever could. You didn't think I could do this. You didn't think I would. I stepped back. But I did. And I will. Every single time you try to sell off the only pieces of Mom we have left. He looked up. Eyes heavier. I failed you, didn't I? I didn't answer right away. Because it wasn't just failure. It was betrayal in a suit and tie. But that night, I didn't want to hold on to the fire anymore. I wanted to hold the truth. You didn't fail me, I said. You never saw me at all. He nodded once. And left. Not angrily. Not dramatically. He just left. Like a man walking out of a room he no longer owned. In the weeks that followed, the silence turned into space. Space I filled with action. I met with contractors. Got quotes on the plumbing. Hired a landscaper to bring back the tulips that had long been swallowed by weeds. I made copies of the deed. Not for safety. For legacy. And one afternoon, while cleaning the attic, I found a shoebox. Inside, old blueprints. Mom's handwriting on the margins. Paint swatches she never got to try. And a small card. Sarah's room. Paint it seafoam green. She dreams in oceans. I sat on the attic floor and cried like a child who had finally come home. Because this house wasn't just bricks and beams. It was memory. It was survival. And now it was mine. I sent one final email to my father, Amy, and Mark. Attached were 3 PDFs, the deed, the court-backed trust transfer, and a notarized letter. Any future attempts to list, market, or transfer this property without my explicit written consent will be pursued legally. This is no longer a warning. It's a boundary. No one replied. And that silence. This time, it sounded like respect. They used silence to erase me. But I used paperwork to make them listen. Because sometimes, your name on a deed speaks louder than anyone who once called you just the helper. I spent most of my life being useful. Not loved. Just useful. The helper. The cleaner. The emotional glue that never cracked, even when I was breaking. But the day they saw me not as the girl in the background, but as the woman who owned the whole frame, everything shifted. The garden was the first thing I reclaimed. I dug out weeds like they were names I no longer answered to. I planted tulips. The same shade of coral my mother loved. The same ones that once lined our walkway like soft little flames. It took me 2 weeks and 12 bandages. But when they bloomed, I cried. Not because of the flowers. Because it felt like I was finally returning something to her. I sent no invitations. Made no announcements. But the word spread. Sarah's fixing up the house. She's making it livable again. As if it hadn't always been. As if they didn't watch it decay and do nothing. One Sunday, Mark texted me. Can I bring the kids by to see the garden? I stared at the message for a long time. But then I said yes. Because resentment is heavy. And some weights aren't worth carrying forever. He showed up with his daughters. They ran through the yard like they were in a movie. And for a few minutes, I forgot to be guarded. It's beautiful, Mark said. He looked older than I remembered. Softer. I didn't know you were capable of all this. The words stung. But I smiled. I've always been capable. You just didn't ask, he nodded. Genuinely. I'm sorry, Sarah. We just took you for granted. Later that week, Amy dropped off a pie. Store-bought, but still warm. We sat on the porch like we used to, before everything turned cold. You were always Mom's favorite, she said suddenly. I looked at her, surprised. Not because you were perfect. Because you stayed. Even when Dad shut down. Even when we disappeared. For a second, I almost let myself believe that maybe I wasn't invisible after all. I was scared of being like her, Amy whispered. Too tender. Too emotional. You reminded me of her. And in this family, tenderness wasn't rewarded. It was punished. We didn't hug. But we sat there in shared silence. And sometimes, that's louder than an apology. Then came the real moment. My father showed up alone. No Vanessa. No smirk. Just an envelope. He handed it to me without a word. Inside, the signed document officially transferring all property rights, family stakes, and holdings to me. No loopholes. No conditions. I looked up. Why? He stared out at the garden. Because I lost your mother. And I nearly lost you. And I think, you were the only one trying to save either of us. My voice trembled. I needed a father. He didn't defend himself. For once. I know. He left after that. No promises. No redemption arc, but something had shifted. For the first time he saw me. Not as an obligation. As a woman he owed the world to. I went inside and pulled the final set of keys from the kitchen drawer. The last lock. The safe. Inside it, old letters from Mom. Tucked away. Never mailed. One of them was to me. Handwritten. Creased. Dated 2 months before she passed. My Sarah. I know you feel unseen. But I see you. I see how you carry us. How you hold space for everyone else's fire and forget to light your own. But one day, you'll stop waiting for someone to say you belong. Because you'll know you always did. I held that letter and wept for the girl I used to be. The house wasn't just mine now. The story was, too. For years, they used my silence to write me out of the picture. But when I took the deed, I also took back the frame. And suddenly they looked up, and finally saw me standing there. He evicted me. But I ended up owning everything he thought I'd never understand. The house. The silence. The story. And most of all, myself. The final deed arrived in a thick envelope. My full name printed on the header, bold and indisputable. Sarah Elena Mitchell listed as sole owner. No shared control. No co-signers. No emergency clauses tucked beneath the ink. Just me. I stood on the porch where my mother used to sip lavender tea and hum old love songs to the flowers. In one hand, the deed. In the other, her old watering can. The tulips had bloomed fully now. Bright coral and burnt orange spilling over the stone border like fire that forgot to burn. Sometimes I still heard her voice in the way the wind caught the chimes. This house is more than walls, Sarah. It's where we remember who we are. And now it was safe, because no one could take it again. Vanessa called once. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was all sugar and desperation. We could make you an offer. Something fair. You don't need to keep all this. But I did. Not out of spite. Out of restoration. So I sent her a short reply. Thank you for your interest. This home is not for sale. Please remove my number. And that was the last time I heard from her. On a rainy Thursday, I drove to the cemetery with the deed in a waterproof sleeve. I knelt by my mother's headstone and placed it gently beside the vase. I kept it, I whispered. They tried, but I didn't let them. And for a moment, I could almost feel her hand on my shoulder. Not a ghost. Not a chill. Just presence. That afternoon, I started repainting the hallway. Seafoam green. She always said it reminded her of peace. Of oceans. Of the way I dreamed with my whole body. It took me 4 coats. and a dozen old memories that splashed across the walls with every stroke. But when I finished, I didn't cry. I smiled. Because sometimes, healing is just a hallway painted in the color you never got to choose as a kid. The house was warm now. Not because of the heater. Because it was mine. Mine to fill. Mine to protect. Mine to grow in. I hosted dinner 2 weeks later. Nothing fancy. Homemade soup. Warm bread. Vanilla candles flickering low. Mark brought wine. Amy brought her kids. Dad brought himself. Quiet. No declarations. Just presence. That was enough. We sat at the table like a family. Not the kind in photos. The kind patched together with effort and slow forgiveness. As the night ended, Amy stood in the hallway, looking at the seafoam paint. She would have loved this, she said. I nodded. She taught me how to stay soft without letting people step on me. They left in pairs. The porch light glowing above them. And when I locked the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. I tucked the deed in a fireproof box in the back closet. Not because I feared losing it. Because I knew now I didn't need it to prove anything. My name was already written in every corner of this home. Every time I opened a window, I let her back in. Every time I watered the tulips, I planted another piece of her legacy. And every time I walked through the house barefoot and unafraid, I bloomed a little more. They tried to evict me on the day I was born. But what they didn't know was that the girl they overlooked was already planting roots. And now I own the house, the story, and the peace they never thought I'd find. If you've ever been written off but came back stronger, drop a heart in the comments. This house is ours now.